Hello. So we're going to talk a little bit about Hesiod. We're looking right now just at the first part of Chapter 2. Chapter 1 is very basic, and a lot of what's in there I think you can figure out on your own. Chapter 2 is going to be more challenging, and the beginning of Chapter 2 I think is going to be the most challenging thing in the course. Because it deals with the creation of the gods, with the creation of the universe, or with the creation of the world, I guess, because I'm not sure the Greeks were thinking in terms of the bigger universe. Because of that, we have to sort of do it first, but it's also, I think, one of the more complex works that we're going to look at, and I'm sorry about that, but so if you read this and say, wow, this stuff's really bad, or really tough, what's the rest of the class going to be like? The rest of the material will be actually a lot easier for you to understand. So, Hesiod. He was an oral poet. He composed, there are two works that are attributed to him, the Theogony and the Works and Days. There are other works that were attributed to him that are almost certainly not by him. These two may or may not be by the same guy. They're both by an author who calls himself Hesiod, and tradition has generally put these two works under Hesiod's belt. He lived in Boeotia, which is in north-central Greece, in the 8th century BCE. So the works, the Theogony and the Works and Days, roughly are composed sometime between 750 and 700 BCE, that time period. When were these works written down? That we don't know. My guess is they were probably not written down till sometime in the 7th century or later, because literacy comes to the Greeks sometime around the middle of the 8th century, and no one is writing down literature if their level of mastery of writing is at like grade school level. So it's going to take a while for them to be able to write down complicated material. So that's why I'm thinking it was quite some time after Hesiod's death that these works were finally actually written down, committed to writing. The big thing going on in Greece is coming out of the Dark Ages. Now, this is a very brief history of Greece. The people we know as the Greeks are partly from a group called the Indo-Europeans, who came out of Western Russia, where the area of the Caucasus Mountains. They traveled into Europe, and then they traveled in the other direction into India. So they're called Indo-European. Most of the European languages, and Sanskrit, and Persian, and some other languages that are Asian, are Indo-European languages. There are a lot of languages that are not. Japanese, Chinese are not Indo-European languages. Hungarian is not an Indo-European language, but this covers a lot. So the Indo-Europeans had a big influence. They were a warrior people. They were a nomadic people. They came riding into Greece from the area around the Caucasus Mountains, and they took over the land from the people they encountered, who appear to have been largely agricultural and probably fairly peaceful. Okay, so the Indo-Europeans took over. The Indo-Europeans came into Greece sometime around 2000 BCE. By 1600 BCE, you've got a fairly developed culture. It's a warrior culture. They have these big fortresses. One of them is at Mycenae, and from 1600 to 1100, that period of the Bronze Age is sometimes called the Mycenaean Age. All of the stories about Greek heroes take place roughly from 1400 BCE to around 1200 or so BCE. That's where the hero stories all take place. But the literature, when we start actually getting the stuff that we can now read, like Homer and like Hesiod, that's being done in the 8th century, the 700s is when that's being written down. Well, that's being composed. It's being written down later. So what happened after the Trojan War and the generation after the Trojan War is that there was some sort of collapse. We don't know what happened. I mean, one theory would be there was the Trojan War. The Greek leaders were off fighting the Trojan War. That meant there really wasn't good control at home. The people got restless because, of course, wars are expensive, which meant that people were paying to sustain their leaders in the field, and that there was some sort of revolt, and that the kings were toppled. But what we do know is by 1100 BCE, the Greek city-states, the Mycenae, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, these city-states that are mentioned in Greek myth, were all collapsed. There were, the palaces were all gone. The walls were a lot of the walls were torn down. People were living in small villages. They were living a bare existence. No longer were they materially well off. They were now poor, and that lasted from around 1100 to around 800 BCE. Around 800, the Greeks start to trade with the Phoenicians and with the Egyptians, and they start colonizing cities in Asia, one in North Africa, and also some in southern Italy and Sicily. So they start spreading out. When that happens, trade rises up. The Greeks pick up an alphabet from the Phoenicians. So the Phoenicians had a writing system. The Greeks took it and adapted it and made it a true alphabet. An alphabet being a writing system that has symbols for vowel sounds and consonant sounds. The Phoenician system was basically just consonants, and you had to imagine what the vowels were. So Greek did not do that. They took some of the Phoenician consonants and made them vowels. Like the first letter of the Greek alphabet, alpha, which makes an A sound, was not a vowel for the Phoenicians. Aleph is a consonant for the Phoenicians. So, at any rate, that's what's going on. So the Dark Ages, this period of material, depression that the Greeks slowly come out of, and by the time Hesiod is living, they're still coming out of it. So Hesiod is pessimistic. He thinks that basically life sucks, then you die, and he does some of that in the Theogony, but in the Works and Days, which is about farming, he does a lot more of that. So we're talking about a guy who's pretty pessimistic overall, and that actually is the way his writing, his works are like. An important thing to keep in mind is what the world looked like to Hesiod. The Earth was a flat, roughly, disk surrounded by the river ocean. So imagine the Earth, which is a flat disk, and around it is the river ocean. On top of that is a solid dome. That's the sky. So in other words, the sky is actually a dome. It is, if you could jump high enough, you would actually hit the sky. That would be what Hesiod and the people in Hesiod's time would have believed. Conversely, there's a bowl underneath the Earth, which is the underworld. Tartarus is the place of punishment, which is at the very bottom of that bowl. But so that's what he's thinking about. So think of a sphere that is bifurcated, cut in two by the disk that is the Earth, right? That's sort of important because when we get to talk a little bit about the Theogony, or when you read the Theogony, one of the things to keep in mind is this story of the castration of Oronas. Why does Oronas get castrated? Well, in the original story, Earth is a solid, sky is also a solid, and they are stuck together like this. Well, if they're stuck together like this, then no one can actually come out and live because they're stuck together. But if you castrate sky, Oronas, he pops up, and now you've got sky as a dome, and now people can move around. That is not the way Hesiod presents the story of the castration, but that seems to be the origin of that castration story. Why does sky get castrated? So that sky will separate from Earth, pop up, and there'll be room for people to move around. Please pay attention when you're reading the Theogony to what Hesiod does with it, because he really turns it into this great family drama. Now, some key scenes from the Theogony. First of all, Oronas and Gaia. So Oronas is sky and Gaia is earth. In fact, I think the translator just refers to Oronas as heaven or sky and Gaia as earth. But those are the Greek names. And Gaia is first. Gaia then produces Oronas. And so first he's her son, then he's her equal, and they're mating, and then he's like this domineering husband figure who won't let the kids come out, which gets Gaia angry, and then she and one of the kids causes them to be castrated, and then basically the marriage is pretty much over at that point. So, so it's a rough marriage, but the Greeks aren't really big on marriage being anything more than an arrangement to have children. This whole love and marriage thing is not part really of the ancient Greek world. The birth of Aphrodite. In Hesiod's account, Aphrodite comes out of the scrotal sac of Oronas that is cut off by Oronas' son Cronus, who then throws the scrotal sac into the sea. It foams in the sea. Out of the foam comes this goddess Aphrodite, and then she drifts over to Cyprus, where she lands. Okay, so that story is told. So out of this castration comes actually the goddess of sexual activity and love. And then Prometheus and Pandora. Prometheus is a Titan. So the Titan is a group of gods. The Olympian gods come after the Titans, but then the Olympians take over, and the Titans are largely relegated to secondary position. Prometheus is actually on the side of the Olympians in that battle, but he's a trickster figure, and he tricks the gods, he tricks Zeus into picking bones instead of meat when there's a sacrifice. And he does this, which then is the model used by people afterwards. So when people sacrifice to the gods, what they do is they cook the meat, they eat the meat, and then they burn the fat and the bones, and the smell of that goes up to the heavens, and the gods partake in it that way. So it's sort of the origin of that practice, but the way it's presented is Prometheus wants to trick Zeus to see if he can get away with it. He gets caught. Zeus then says, okay, no more fire for humans, and you got to stop this. Prometheus doesn't stop it. He then steals fire and gives it to humans, and then for some reason it can never be taken away again, and so now humans have fire. That's when Zeus says, okay, first of all, I'm going to take you, I'm going to send you to the Caucasus Mountains far off, and you are going to be chained to, in some versions, to a pillar, in some versions to a cliff, and an eagle is going to come and eat out your liver every day, and because you're immortal, the liver will grow back, and so you'll be in this constant torment. Like every day, you'll have a new liver, and the eagle will come and eat it, and so you'll be in pain all the time. And that'll happen for thousands of years. What's going to happen to humans is, in this case, humans are just men. I'm going to create woman, and the woman is Pandora. She is not called by that name in the Theogony. She is given that name in the Works and Days. And there's a slight difference in how the story is told. In the Theogony, it's not so much Pandora herself who's the problem, but woman is the problem. And Pandora is just the first one. So that's some stuff to think about as you read the Works and Days. I urge you to focus on the stories, focus on the narrative portions. I think you'll have more fun that way. I think it'll make more sense if you do that. The work is not arranged as beautifully narrative a form as Homer's works. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are well laid out. They're beautifully crafted as stories. This is, back and forth with different stories and other stuff's mixed in. So it's going to be somewhat difficult to read, but focus on the narrative parts, and I think you'll get the most out of it that way. All right, see you next time.